All right, lesson number 7 is where we're at today. The title of it, Shall Suffer Persecution. That's one thing that in this country we have suffered very little persecution because of being Christian. Now, maybe some of us has more than others, but you know, in other countries there has been a lot of persecution to the Christians, and so that's one thing we can be thankful for, that we haven't suffered that much and being persecuted for the things of God. But you know, that day may come, and how are we prepared for that? We might think we are prepared, but are we really prepared for such a time to come like that? And what are we to do when that time comes? Hopefully some of them questions can be answered as we study this lesson here. Our memory verse is Matthew 10:22. And ye shall be hated of all men for my name's sake, but he that endureth to the end shall be saved. That's one of our verses, so I'm going to hold off saying anything on that. I'm going to read the junior emphasis, and it says, we are not to fear persecution. You know, when I was a kid and I thought about persecution and all, it kind of scared me a little, you know, or some. And I thought, well, maybe it won't happen, you know, maybe this, you know. But then, you know, as I got older and got to reading in the Bible at how people were persecuted back in the Bible time. Paul was persecuted, Peter was persecuted, different ones were persecuted. And then you get to thinking about Jesus. Was he persecuted? All the time, it seemed like, you know. And I thought to myself, well, you know, if Jesus went through the persecution for me, then I can go through persecution for him. And you know, it settled my mind then more than when I was young and just kind of was thinking about what was going on. We are not to fear persecution. God will take care of his people. We must confess Christ always. We must love Christ most. We must give up ourselves to Christ. If we endure to the end, we will live in heaven. God always tells us the truth. He tells us the good things. He tells us the hard things. He tells the things we must suffer. The Christian life is not for half-hearted people. And you know, that's so true. It takes real saints. It takes brave and true men and women. There is work to do. There are enemies to meet. There are things to suffer. At the end, there is a reward for all who never give up Christ. And you know, that's the thing that we need to really look for. You know, here on earth, we might live to be 70, 80, 90, 100 years old, you know. And we may have to put up with a lot of persecution. But you know, what is 100 years or 110 years? Very few people make it 110 years. But say we make it 110 years. How long is that persecution compared to eternity? You know, it's pretty little, you know. So we need to stay true to God, and God will stay true to us. It's up to us whether we want God to stay true to us. If we stay true to him, he'll definitely stay true to us. If we don't stay true to him, then, he's going to let us go our way. And so it's all up to us. How are we going to accept Jesus, and how are we going to respect him as we live for him? And it's very important there. Our first reading there is Matthew 10 and 24 and 25. The disciple is not above his master, nor the servant above his Lord. It is enough for the disciple that he be as his master, and the servant as his Lord. If they have called the master of the house Beelzebub, how much more shall they call them of his household? Having a part with Jesus, the disciple is not above his master. He cannot expect to be treated better than Jesus. How can we expect to be treated better than Jesus? I feel like we have, really. But there's coming a time when we might have to put up with what Jesus put up. And what did it cost Jesus? Oh, it cost him his not character, but they wanted to downgrade his character. That was one thing, And, it cost him this, it cost him that. And then at the end, it cost him his life, too. But, that was all in the workings of the plan of salvation. And that's what's most important. We, ourselves, if it costs our life, then we'll just get to heaven quicker than what we thought we would, Dan, is what that is how that works there. We cannot expect to be treated better than Jesus. They laughed at him. Many would not believe him. They called him Beelzebub, and that's not a good name. That is, I think it's in our vocabulary. No, it's not in the vocabulary, but in the junior vocabulary, it's the prince of devils is what it is what the explanation of that is. The prince of devil, and it's the lowest and the worst devil that they could come up with is what it is. Although we know that if it's of the devil, it's of sin. And we like I have mentioned before, we kind of put degrees of sin. There's sin, and then there's worser sin, so to speak. Well, that's what they were trying to do, is call Jesus the worstest of the devil. Now, I know that's not the right grammar to use, but I'm trying to explain. I'm trying to get you to know that it was the worst of the worst is what they were trying to do. They tried to stone Jesus. People spied on him. They spit in his face. They struck him. They scourged him. And finally, they crucified him. Can we now endure some of the same? That's something that only you can answer that. And it doesn't do any good to answer to me, but answer it in your own mind and put the thought that Jesus went through what he went through. I named several of them there. What am I going to have to suffer? We don't have to worry about it. I mean, we might think about it, but we don't have to worry about it. But one thing we know, if we keep our eyes on Jesus, stay in tune with him, he will take us through whatever the cost might be. Can we not endure some of the same? I'm going to read some Beatitudes there that Jesus quoted, Matthew 5 and 10 through verse 12. Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sakes, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Now there's a promise in there, see? If you're persecuted for righteousness' sake, then yours is the kingdom of heaven. In other words, you will inherit the kingdom of heaven. Goes on and says, "Blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceeding glad." How can we rejoice in persecution? Well, if you will read the Fox Book of Martyrs, you will see that a lot of the ones that was being burned at the stake was also singing the hymns of God while they were being burned. And some of them even said, "Lay not this charge to them," to the ones that was doing it. The first reaction, earthly reaction, or the first reaction of self would be to get back at them. But that's not the Christian way to do it. That's not the way Christians does it. That's not the way Jesus did. When they hung him on the cross, he said the very same thing. Lay not this sin to their charge, because they know not what they're doing. And and that's a good example for us. It says, "Rejoice and be exceeding glad, for great is your reward in heaven." That's what we need to be rejoicing about. "For so persecuted they the prophets which were before you." We're not the only one that's going through this trials or persecution. We can look at that. Who else has went through this persecution? Well, we can go all the way back to Jesus' time. We can go all the way back to the disciples and bring it forward to what I've already mentioned, the Fox Books of Martyrs, of how many people were persecuted different years in there. All the way, it seems like all the way from the New Testament church all the way till now practically. And there is persecution going on now. And then you can take the prophets that was before Christ went through a lot of persecution. We think of Jeremiah, for one, that was persecuted, and Ezekiel, and different ones that were persecuted. But they held true to God, and that's a good example for us to do ourselves. Let's go to verse 26. "Fear them not, therefore, for there is nothing covered that shall not be revealed, and hid that shall not be known. What I tell you in darkness, that speak ye in light. And what ye hear in the ear, that preach ye upon the housetops. And fear not them which kill the body, but are not able to kill the soul, but rather fear him which is able to destroy both soul and body in hell." As we look at that, fear sin, but not persecution. Fear sin. Stay away from sin. How many scriptures in the Bible says shun sin, or flee from sin, run away from sin? Get as far away from it. That's what we should fear, is sin, not persecution. Some things we should fear. Some things we should not fear. Jesus says to fear them not, those who persecute us. Why not? Because God sees it all. He will take care of everything in time. There is nothing covered or hid from him. Fear not them which kill the body. Why not? Because they are not able to kill the soul. If we are saved, our soul, the real you, will go to heaven. And that's one thing. If death comes upon us, that's the reason why we need to be ready at all times, is because we never know when death's going to come upon us, whether it's by persecution, whether it's by a heart attack, or whether God just calls us home. And where are we going to spend? How we live that last minute of our life is how we're going to spend eternity. And that's what really needs to be emphasized in that. The difference between body and soul. From Jesus' word, we learn that one, body and soul, are separate or distinct meanings though joined in one person, since one can be killed and the other not. And number two, the soul is not formed of a material, since material weapons or hands cannot kill it. It is a spirit. The body is what's material. And so that's something that we need to keep lined up in our minds. The body, people could kill it. But the soul, they can't touch that. They can't touch that. You're the one that's in control of that soul. You're the one that can say, I'm going to live for God, or I'm going to deny God. And then that it is turned over then to God then at that time then. But we need to always keep our eyes on Jesus. Remember what Jesus went through. That's one of the things that I like to keep in the forefront of my mind. Remember what Jesus went through. If I have to go through that, so be it. So be it. So who then does but rather fear him which is able to destroy both soul and body in hell refer to? Some would say that it means we have to fear the devil. You know, that may be what some people say it. No. If we are saved and filled with the Holy Spirit, we have power over sin and over Satan, over that old devil. We have power over that. It is true that we must be sober and vigilant at all times, because our adversary, the devil, wants to devour us. And he, as a thief, cometh not but for to steal and to kill and to destroy. I think 1 Peter 5:8, I believe, is where that's found at there. And so we need to remember that, because that's all the devil wants to do, is to destroy and to kill and to just make a mess out of our life. He is that adversary who, as a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour. We are told to be sober and to be vigilant. We are told to resist the devil. And that's one thing we need to do. Always have our guard up for the Satan. Always have your guards up. Yeah. You know, resist the devil. We are told to give no place to the devil. You know, if we resist the devil and give no place to him, and then we are told to stand against the wiles of the devil. If we do all three of those things and stay sober and vigilant and remember that he is the one that is trying to devour us and gobble us up and get us into all kinds of trouble, put our guards up for that. And you know, when we do that and we read our Bible, and we pray every day, read our Bible every day, we have our mind on Christ, then he can't touch us. He can't touch us. It's when we let the guards down and we get feeling sorry for ourselves. Watch out, because that's a good time for the devil to strike, and he will do that. He will do that. So that's the reason why it's recorded here in the Bible. Be sober and be vigilant. Resist the devil. I think that's found in James 4:6. Give no place to the devil. That's Ephesians 4:27. Stand against the wiles of the devil. Ephesians 6:11. We are told to overcome evil. Overcome evil. By the Lord's help, we can overcome evil. But we may boldly say, the Lord is my helper, and I will not fear what man shall do unto me. And you know, then that's just, in other words, that's just keeping Christ in the forefront of our mind at all times. Keep our eyes on Christ, and that's what will happen. We do not need to fear the devil if we belong to God. Satan cannot do us any harm without permission from God. You know when Satan came and wanted to tempt Job, God put restrictions on him, on Satan, what he could do. And, God's going to put restrictions on him, what he can do to us also. Because isn't there a verse in the Bible where it says he's only going to put the temptation that we can bear? But we have to have God in the foresights of our mind at all times. We can't do it on our own. But if we, with God, go hand in hand, we can go through that. Satan cannot do any harm without permission from God. God is the only one we need to fear. That's absolute right there. God is the only one we need to fear. And Ecclesiastes 12:13 says it best. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. Fear God. And I've brought the illustration out before. I know I have, but it never hurts to go over. Don't be afraid of God. I'm scared, But fear God with awe. That's what we need to do. Almighty. And an awe unto it. That's the fear that he's talking about. I'm sure probably in other languages there are probably two separate words, the fear and the fear. But in the English language it consists of one word. And sometimes we might get mixed up on that. But don't be afraid of God, but fear Him with awe. That's what that means. Our part is to speak out what God tells us in darkness, in our heart. We are to preach or teach the gospel. And that was the Great Commission that Jesus gave to His disciples, which goes all the way down to us, is to go into all the world and preach the gospel. Teach the gospel, preach the gospel, bring the gospel to people, explain to them, deal with them. That's all part of preaching the gospel. Deal with them, compel them, and help them to be able to see what there is really for you. Matthew 10:29. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a farthing? And one of them shall not fall on the ground without your Father. But the very hairs of your head are all numbered. That's talking about us. Fear ye not, therefore, ye are of more value than many sparrows. God cares for us. God cares for us. He also loves us. How do I know He loves? How do I know He loves us? How do I know He loves me? He gave His life for me. Jesus gave His life for me. So, He was interested in mankind. He was very interested in mankind to get him back into the fellowship of God. And, that was through love, and that was through grace, and that was through mercy. That He did what He did to get us back into the fellowship with Him. God cares for us. Read how much God cares for the sparrows and even the hairs on your head. He sees every fall of a sparrow. A sparrow is a bird that doesn't have many uses for. We don't have many uses for sparrows. You can't hunt them and eat them, or anything, but they're important to God. That was one bird that when I got my BB gun, why my dad told me you can only shoot certain birds, and a sparrow was one of them because they got in and messed up the barns and things like that, and that was one that I could shoot, and all. But God knew every time one of them fell. Every time one of them fell, God knew it. He sees every fall of a sparrow. He numbers every hair on our head. He knows exactly how many's on our head. That's what He knows about us. Here I am, just a little speck here on this earth, but yet He knows that much about me. And much, much, much more He cares about you and about me. He does. Way more than that. Way more than the 3 muches that I put on there. He never forgets. We may have to suffer and even be killed in persecution. That may happen. But God will bring us out all right in the end. God will be with us as we suffer. Probably will not prevent the suffering. He's capable of preventing the suffering, but if He wants us to go through the suffering, then what are we to do? Go right through the suffering. I know it's tough. It's tough to think about, but right now's the time to get that settled. If we have problems with that, it's best to get it settled right now, and to know that whatever God has for us, we may not know what God has for us. We don't even know what God has for us in the next hour. But whatever it is, we need to be established in the things of God to be able to let God lead us through whatever might face us today, tomorrow, Tuesday, Wednesday, or whenever it comes. We need to allow God to lead us and to guide us, and we need to keep our eyes on Him. Verse 32 and 33, whosoever therefore shall confess me before men, him will I confess also before my Father which is in heaven. But whosoever shall deny me before men, him will I also deny before my Father which is in heaven. Do we want to be denied, or do we want to be confessed? That's a pretty easy question for most of us. We want to be confessed for Him, but we have to do something in order for that to be. Will we confess or deny Jesus? What are we going to do? What we do depends on how it will be done later for us. Will we confess or deny Jesus? Do you want Jesus to confess you before His Father? Of course, we all do. Then we must confess Him before men. Well, how do we confess Him before men? Take the gospel to people. Yes. Take the gospel to people. And I've mentioned it before. The best way to take the gospel is tell them your experience. Tell them your experience. What was your experience in that? That's something that you had that feeling. You knew what went on. I mean, no, you couldn't express how it happened, but you know what went on and how it made you feel, and that cannot be taken away from you. You can give it up, but that can't be taken away from you. And that's one of the best ways we can. Then we must confess Him before men. We must never be afraid to speak for Him. Peter was a little bit afraid to speak for Jesus when Jesus was going through the trial, remember? And Peter Peter kind of got way off base when one of the little maidens says, you were part of him, wasn't you? No, I wasn't part of him. And then pretty soon somebody else says, oh, no, I wasn't part of him. And I think 3 times that happened. And he says, no, I wasn't part of it. But you know, when the cock crew, when that rooster crowed, why, Peter remembered what Jesus had said. And Peter was not prepared. Even though he knew it was coming, he was not prepared. But then after the day of Pentecost, how did he act? It was a whole lot different, you know. Well, we're after the day of Pentecost, and we can be that second Peter. We can be just like that second Peter and be able to stand up. And that's what's expected of us, to stand up for Jesus. We must never be afraid to speak for him. We must own him. Well, we have to own him in order to be able to speak up like that. We must have him in our hearts. Never be ashamed of him. If we deny him before men, what did the verse say? If we are afraid to speak up for him and for the right, he will have to deny us before his Father. He will have to deny us before his Father. And he will say 3 words that we don't want to have spoken to us. Depart from me. And that is the worst things that can be spoken to us, is to depart from me. But you know, if we do as it says here, if we will confess him to other men, then he will confess us before the Father. And he won't say them words, depart from me, but he will say, enter in. And that's what we want there. Verse 36 and 37, and I'm going to read 38 and 39 all in one there. And a man's foe shall be they of his own household. He that loveth father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and he that loveth son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And he that taketh not his cross and follow after me is not worthy of me. He that findeth his life shall lose it, and he that loseth his life for my sake shall find it. The dedication we must make. We are told that godly people shall suffer persecution. The world does not like them, like the Christian person, godly person. You know, we run into that. Politics, you can see how they are so against godly people in politics. Out there in the world, how they are ready to just obliterate the Christian people. And that's what they want to do. Why? Because they're driven by the devil. The devil's using them to do that. And so the world does not like godly people. Sometimes persecution comes from one's own family, though. And sometimes that happens. Still, we must hold fast to Jesus. You know, most of us like to be around family. I do. I like to be around family. And, you know, most of my family is agreeable with salvation, with the Christian things, you know. And, you know, I really don't have a problem with that. But, you know, not all families are that way. And, you know, you can suffer persecution from your own family. And so we need to, what does it say here? Continue to keep our eyes on Jesus. And because that's what he says, he that loveth father and mother more than me is not worthy of me. Well, we want to be worthy of him. We want to be worthy of him. And he that loveth son and daughter more than me is not worthy of me. Well, we don't want to fall into that trap at all. Sometimes persecution comes from our own family. Still, we must hold fast to Jesus. We must love him most of all. We must love him most of all. We must love him more than father or mother, son or daughter. It doesn't mention it here, but we love him more than our spouse. That's about the only thing we need to love more than our spouse, though, is God. But Christian spouses can understand that, and they know what you're talking about. And I want my spouse to love God more than me. That's just the way it is. But if we do not love him more than father, mother, son, or daughter, we are not worthy of him. Not fit for him. We must love Jesus better than something else. Ourselves. Ourselves is included in that. I'm going to reread that. We must love Jesus better than ourselves. You know, how many people do that? How many people love themselves more than anything else? There's a lot of people that way. There's a lot of them that. He tells us to take our cross, put to death our old self that is sinful. The cross is an instrument of death. To take it is to put to death the sinful, carnal, earthly self. It is to be dead with Christ from the rudiments of the world. Every person is either, I like this statement that they put in here. Every person is either dead to Christ and joined to self, or dead to self and joined to Christ. You know, that's the only, there's two ways that you can go. There's only two ways you can go. And that explains it pretty simple way. That's a simple way of explaining it. I'll reread that. Every person is either dead to Christ and joined to self. That's not the way you want to be. Or dead to self and joined to Christ, and that's the way you want to be there. We must follow Jesus always. We must follow Jesus always. Let me back up. There's a difference between I've already read that part there. We must follow Jesus always. This is the best. Because he that findeth his life tries to have everything safe and nice for himself shall lose it. Will have nothing worthwhile. But he that loses his life, gives up self for Jesus' sake, shall find it. That's the way we want to be, is that latter part. Forget self. Forget self. I like that second verse that we sing as our opening song that we sing, at the very first there. Forget about yourself and put your mind on Jesus. I think that's the second verse of what we usually open up with there. Forget about yourself. Just get it out of the way and put your mind on Jesus. That's what we're here for, is to worship Jesus. Give Jesus the glory and the praise. And that's kind of what he's saying here. Forget self. Live for Jesus. He will give you all that is good. And that's exactly what he will do for us there. He will give us all that is good. We'll go to Matthew 10 and 22, which is our memory verse. And it says, "And ye shall be hated of all men for my name's sake, but he that endureth to the end shall be saved." You know, the Christian life is a life of endurance. It's a life of enduring to the end. Not struggling to the end. I don't mean that. But I mean to go all the way with Jesus. You know, some people put a Christian life on as it being a struggle. You know. But you know, if we keep our eyes on Jesus and keep our eyes on the final reward, then we are going to try and strive to the best of our ability and with God's help to get to that reward. You know, you take somebody out there running a race, and you know, I was never a long endurer runner like some people were. Run the mile, it seemed like it took forever to run a mile, you know. We had a track there that went around the football field, and I think you had to go around it 4.5 times or something like that, you know, and you passed the finish line 4 times, I think, before you got to the actual finish, you know. But you know, that last lap then, you set your eyes on that finish line. I got to go that far. I got to go that far, you know. And you kind of got a second wind, Dan, and was able to go. But you know, if we keep our eyes on Jesus, He will give us that 3rd, 4th, 5th wind, whatever it takes to get through. And He'll be right there in the battle with us. And that's what's most important. The reward to those who endure. The world will hate us if we follow Jesus truly. But if we endure, stick to Him, never give up, trust Him to the end, we shall be saved. The word saved here means when we die, He will take us to heaven to live forever with Him. And you know, that's so important. That is so important that, you know, it's not how we start. You know, there's a lot of people that made a good start. Oh, yeah. They made a good start, and they were going to be in it to the end. And maybe it was at a revival, or maybe it was at a camp meeting, or maybe it was at a church service or something. And they'll go for a while and then fall away. And where are they today? They're lost out there. Where did that zeal go to, you know? But you know, it's not how we start out. It's good that we start out, but let's keep that zeal. Let's keep our eyes on God. Let's strive to get to the end. And when we cross the finish line, we're still striving when that time comes. So it's very important. I can't stress enough how important it is to stay in the buggy, so to speak. Stay in there with God, because you fall out, you're going to be left behind. So stay in the buggy and stay after it there. Kind of a summary here. Persecution is promised to the Christian. It is part of the devil's warfare. Our part is to confess Christ and remain true to Him. And to remain true to Him. How short, and I think I kind of mentioned this, not in these words, but how short is the here and how long the hereafter? I kind of mentioned that earlier, but that was a sentence that was recorded in our Quarterly there, and I kind of wanted to. It was a catchy saying, and you know how I like little catchy saying. How short is the here, and how long the hereafter? And one more thing: does God tell us all things that are going to happen before it happens? He doesn't. So we don't know. We don't know what's in front of us an hour from now, or tomorrow, or whatever. But you know, God can keep us prepared if we will keep our eyes on Him to face whatever He has. He knows exactly what we're going to face. And it's probably a good thing. I'm going to say it is a good thing for us really not to know what's going to happen in the future, but to just be prepared and keep our sights on Jesus Christ. Amen.